Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Soccer Morning. Soccer Morning? North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. We are live, starting out a new week. Not as well as I would have hoped. That music, by the way, right there, Fever by the Black Keys. First song in the playlist of John O'Shea, who is our DJ for the day. Thank you very much to Mr. O'Shea for his contribution and for his music. It's all very nice stuff. Fantastic show lined up for you today. We're going to talk about all of the happenings around the world of soccer. That includes Atlanta getting their MLS team. That news broke yesterday. What happened to Sunday being a day of rest, of no news? What happened to that? First, we get the Atlanta news. Our friend Jonathan Tannenwald from Philly.com, among those who broke it, he may have been first. We'll talk to him at 10:40 today. Get his perspective both on that story out and also on the trade of Jack McInerney to the Montreal Impact for Andrew Wenger and the Philadelphia Union 2-2 draw with the Chicago Fire this weekend. So we'll talk through that. And then late yesterday, in an effort to bury it or because it happened and they had to get the release out, I don't know. U.S. Soccer announcing that they have fired Tom Sermanni as head coach of the U.S. women's national team. That is a shocking development. It is 14 months until the Women's World Cup in Canada. And Sermanni was tasked with changing the way that team played. Very much like Jurgen Klinsmann was tasked with changing the way that the U.S. men's national team played. Sermanni was doing the same thing. He was tinkering. He was changing things up, formation, personnel, bringing in new players. And apparently, some of those players, the stalwarts, the veterans, the stars, perhaps, that's the word on the street, weren't too happy with Mr. Sermanni, and he is out as U.S. women's national team head coach. We could talk about that, and certainly talk about the dynamic of player power in that team and in general when it comes to managerial head coaching changes. I'd also like to remind you that we are listener supported here at Soccer Morning. Please go to soccermorning.com to check out how you can support the show. It is imperative that you guys help us out there at soccermorning.com to keep us going. And good news for everybody who's been upset, concerned, annoyed, inconvenienced, whatever. The live stream is back up. Fantastic news. Yay, live stream's back up. Stitcher, TuneIn, the Android app, the NASN Android app. Go search that in your Google Play Store. You'll find it there. I've got it on my phone. I'd like to have it up right now, but I don't. Maybe I'll do that for the next break. We can listen to the live stream there at NASN on the NASN app. Again, Stitcher, TuneIn. NASN.TV/live is a live stream of the program as well. Let's talk about this Atlanta news. I'm going to lead with this. People love expansion. You guys love expansion, don't you? And it's exciting. It's exciting to think about a new team with a new fan base and new colors and a new logo and a new name and new. Everything's new. New is always better than old. Always, right? Most of the time. This is why Julian Green is so exciting. He's new. He's shiny. It's new. It's like you're taking the action figure out of the box. Now, I know you're not supposed to take the action figure out of the packaging if you're one of those nerds, but you take that action figure out of the box. Give me something else that is so fun to unpackage. That's what Julian Green is for the U.S. national. That's what an expansion team is. We don't have any confirmation from MLS yet. Nothing yet. In fact, when asked for comment by Mr. Tannenwald, their response was, "We're still in negotiation. Things are ongoing." But this has been an eventuality, a foregone conclusion for quite some time. You've heard me say it on this show, and I've been given some information as well that indicated that the Atlanta Falcons organization, who is the sports arm of everything Arthur Blank does, because that's who he owns, the Atlanta Falcons of the NFL, have been operating on the assumption that this was going to get done very shortly for some time now. So here we go. Atlanta, MLS market. We can take this in pieces if you like. Phone lines are open, 347-756-6276, because I do want to hear not only from the Atlanta people, where's the ATL? Where's Atlanta? Step up. Give me your reasons why we should not be concerned as MLS fans about Atlanta as an MLS market. Because, again, taking this in pieces, is Atlanta worthy of an MLS team? First question. Don't consider anything else about this team, but is Atlanta worthy of an MLS team? I'd argue yes, if you believe that getting into that southeastern area of the country is important. Now, we got Orlando coming in. It's a nice town, lots of tourists. They built something with Orlando City, completely deserving of a team. We know Miami's coming in, although that's not completely official yet, and that's why Atlanta is Team 22 and not Team 23. So that's two teams in Florida. Florida, parts of it may or may not be the Southeast, depending on how you look at it. Certainly a little bit different. Atlanta is the center of the southeastern part of the country. Everything flows to Atlanta. All roads lead to Atlanta if you're in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, northern Florida, Tennessee. Did I say Alabama already? All roads lead to Atlanta. And that's why Atlanta makes sense as an MLS market. And there's certainly a soccer community in Atlanta. The Silverbacks are there. Let's not forget about the NASL Atlanta Silverbacks, a team that's had a bit of an up and down history. They were on hiatus for a little while. They now have a manager via Skype in Eric Winalda. Not really. Flying in for the games, leaving training to the assistants. And just to make it clear, it doesn't seem that there's any connection between the Silverbacks and this new MLS team. Arthur Blank's not involved in the Silverbacks. He's the cash. He's the money behind the new MLS venture. There's not going to be a connection there. So you have a couple of questions on that side. Number one, do the Silverbacks survive? I'm guessing probably not. Don't know. Probably not. And this is why the NASL does not get along with the MLS, by the way. Did I say the MLS? This is why the NASL does not get along with MLS. So when Bill Peterson says things that are snarky and combative, this is why. MLS is going to go into Atlanta. Again, a market that should have an MLS team if you're going to just take the big picture of the country and say, what cities make sense? Atlanta is one of them. But then you get into the details of this. The details are Arthur Blank, NFL owner, writing a check, whatever that is, to the Board of Governors, to the MLS owners as they exist right now. That may or may not be the major factor. I don't think it's just about making money for MLS, but that's a part of it. How much is he going to pay? If Orlando's paying 70 and New York's paying 100, I imagine Atlanta's in the 80, 85, $90 million range, somewhere in there. There's that. And they're going to play in the brand new, not yet built, NFL Stadium in Atlanta. They're going to share a stadium with the Atlanta Falcons, similarly to the way that the Seattle Sounders share a stadium with the Seattle Seahawks. Now, is Atlanta going to have any sort of success relatively close to what's going on in Seattle? First of all, they're not going to get 35 to 40,000. It's not happening. They're not even planning on it. They're planning on a design that puts the bed sheets up, as you see at BC Place in Vancouver, where you get a intimate atmosphere. I'm using air quotes here, an intimate atmosphere of 20,000 seats. So they're going to hope to sell 20,000. It's going to be on plastic grass. It's on turf. That's another thing that bothers a lot of people. The NFL stadium, the turf, the NFL owner, the fact that Atlanta has some questions, and don't get mad, Atlanta people. Don't get mad. You've got to prove it. Here's the problem. Lots of people want to say, well, it's an old cliche, it's an old stereotype that Atlanta doesn't care about professional sports, that we don't support our teams. We only go to the Braves games when they're in the playoffs. The Falcons don't sell out. The Thrashers had to move. Look, it's a hard-won reputation you got there, Atlanta. Now, you could argue that if the team is successful in whatever professional sport, the fans will show up. That's a lot of pressure on Blank and company, by the way. Better make that MLS team successful or Atlanta won't show up. But again, you've got to prove it. The rest of the country is going to look at you with a jaundiced eye for a reason. Same way we're going to look at Miami. Same exact way we're going to look at Miami. And this is where it's scary for MLS. The new era of expansion. This is 3.0, whatever catchy label you want to put on it. This is why it's scary. We're now getting into markets where there are questionable fan bases. I know there's excitement. I know Terminus Legion exists. I know Atlanta wants, ATL wants MLS is a thing that's happening. 2,500 likes on Facebook or whatever I saw yesterday. I saw that. I know what's happening, people. And again, where are you? I want to hear from Atlanta. I want to hear from everybody else, but I also want to hear from Atlanta. Does Atlanta listen to Soccer Morning? Because I think that's an obvious sign that there's a soccer market down there, right? I know a couple people do. I know we've had some Atlanta interaction. Maybe it's a little tough during the workday. 10 o'clock in the morning. Tough for them to call in. 347-756-6276. Here's what I'll say on the positive, not on the positive side, sort of take away some of the skepticism. Number one, yes, I understand turf is not the preferred surface to play on. And I'm the first one to say that the soccer played in Seattle, particularly when it's wet and raining, and it's always raining in Seattle, is not the best soccer. It gets a little ugly. But turf is going to get better. As technology improves, it's going to continue to be. It's already better than it was 10 years ago. It's going to be better in 10 more years. Okay, so let's not get overly excited about the plastic grass. I know that's a problem. I know it's annoying. I know soccer's meant to be played on natural grass, but it might not be the end of the world. Now, playing in the NFL stadium, I get that. Rick in Philly, what's up, man?
Hey, Jason. Back in 2000, the University of North Texas did a study on MLS and demographics and all, and they predicted that MLS would succeed in cities that had low minority populations and few professional-level teams. And the three cities they projected back in 2000 that would be the biggest hits for MLS expansion were Seattle, Portland, and Philadelphia.
All right.
And I think it's fair to say all three of those have worked.
Okay.
Atlanta was actually listed as one of the 5 worst potential markets for expansion.
Okay.
Based on that criteria.
Okay.
MLS, if it's going to succeed in Atlanta, is going to have to successfully market to African Americans, which is something I don't know that they've ever successfully done.
Okay,
and
that's fine.
I think is going to be the biggest challenge.
Look. Atlanta is a diverse city. Okay, Atlanta has a lot of reputations. Okay, Atlanta's a diverse city. It's got an exploding Hispanic population, as do most major American cities. And yes, you're right in that regard. But this is a cross-section thing. This is, again, the pressure is on. And I'm not going to say that I'm not worried. I'm certainly worried, Rick. But I'm going to give them the opportunity to prove it. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt for now. Because I've seen enough people and I've seen enough excitement that I have reason to believe. Can they get 20,000 out for every game? I don't know, but how many teams do that?
No, that's absolutely a fair point. But I've been following MLS expansion through the lens of this study. It was released, I think, 2000 or 2001. Now, almost every beat that they hit in that study was accurate. And the results have tallied every time. Okay. So when you look at that and you look at which ones have succeeded, and then you see Atlanta, which is one of the case studies that they say it will not work there, especially when you look at Arthur Blank as well, using MLS as one of the angles to get funding for this new stadium, you wonder how much he's invested in that.
I understand that. Blank has to put his money where his mouth is. He's got to put the checks out there. Blank checks. That's what I'm going to say. And because it's a pun and it's funny and it makes me laugh. He's got to put blank checks out there. He's got to figure out how to make this team successful by spending money on it. And it's going to be a loss leader for him for quite some time. And he's going to have to just look, if you want this team to be successful in terms of the on-field product, the number of fans in the stands, the excitement level in that city, and this is a city, here's another reason to be skeptical. This is a city that not only has Atlanta Falcons NFL football, they've got the Atlanta Hawks, they've got the Atlanta Braves, obviously, in baseball. They have Georgia football, they have Georgia Tech football, they have SEC football in general is a major thing to compete with in terms of getting on the front page. It could be the middle of spring, and your top stories in Atlanta with an MLS team. Your top stories in Atlanta are going to be the Braves pitching staff, the Georgia signee commitment. I mean, those are the things that are going to have to get bumped off, not off the front page, maybe, because most teams in MLS don't get on their front pages. But you've got to find a way to wiggle your way into the conversation on a consistent basis. I'm going to go over some of these tweets here just because I think this gives you a sense of what other people around the country are thinking. Duffy Alverson, not Duffy, Thomas 19064. Why is Atlanta worth it? Simple answer. It's last big missing media market, TV money. So he's got TV money as the major driver. I think that's true. Aaron Staller says a disaster. Will likely have an idiot GM, a local sports media very inclined to ignore it, and a field turf NFL stadium. Wistoon 33. This is a moronic idea on so many levels. I thought MLS was going away from NFL stadiums and artificial turf. Mike Lemus. It'll work well if they're not on field turf and can get out of the shadow of NFL, NBA, MLB franchises. Will take time. Chris Allen, would you buy shares in the ATL franchise? Not me. Southerners are just outright anti-soccer. Sad but true. Is that fair?
It's absolutely true.
Is that? But
the argument is that it's the last untapped television market. That goes against the experience in the smaller cities like Portland, where you've got a vibrant soccer community. You sell out every time.
But Rick, I don't disagree with you, okay? And there, obviously, Portland brings something significant to MLS. We just saw it this weekend when they hosted Seattle and put on one of the best shows we've ever seen in this league. But let me cite two things. Well, number one, the research you're citing is a generation old at this point, okay? And demographics have shifted mightily in 14 years. I know you know this, okay? And I'm not telling you things you don't know, but let's just put that in the proper context. And number two, MLS was always going to get to a place, particularly if it did leverage those markets you mentioned, Philadelphia, Seattle, Portland. Obviously, Orlando is sort of the last bastion of the big city without a major professional sports influence to detract from MLS. It was always going to hit a ceiling with that. It was going to have to go places where it's competing with other sports every day for attention. And it was going to have to go places to increase its television market value, or it wasn't going to be able to get over the hump. Or we're always talking about MLS as a secondary minor league. You can be okay with that. I'm fine with MLS fans saying, I like MLS as it is. This is great. Let's just keep it going. We don't need to rock the boat. We don't need to become one of the top leagues in the world for me to enjoy it. That's a completely legitimate viewpoint, but I don't think that most people hold it, Rick.
No. I think all those points are entirely valid, and there may be more recent research that I'm not privy to. My point with citing it was simply that it had been so unerringly accurate over the last, let's say, 7 years. As far as expansion into the South, I mean, obviously it's necessary. You need a national footprint if you're going to have, if you're going to be perceived as a major league in the United States. For the same reason, you need a team in New York proper. But Atlanta is such a difficult sports market with such demographic challenges, and places like Nashville, for example, or Charleston, these are places where there is entrenched soccer fanship, where there is a reasonable media market that does not necessarily face the same challenges.
Okay.
I think it would have made more sense to use a stepping stone approach and then see in another 10 years if Atlanta is a place you want to move to.
That's an arbitrary timeline that you've created based on what exactly? Because you could argue pretty persuasively that MLS has done a stair-step approach with Portland and their success, with what we've seen in Seattle, and that a place like Atlanta, because if MLS succeeds in Atlanta, that means a hell of a lot more than if it succeeds in Portland, does it not?
Does it mean more to the national narrative? Absolutely. Does it mean more to the development of soccer in the United States? I would disagree.
Okay, I suppose that's debatable. But again, if the goal is to get MLS on the level of, I'm just going to pick a target, the NHL, the NBA, which it's not, and let's be honest about this, if the goal is to get it there, or if you want to take it outside of the American professional sports context and say, if the goal is to compete with Liga MX or to become the best league in this part of the world, or to compete with bigger European leagues for talent, it's got to be in places like Atlanta, Rick. It just does. I mean, I'm not saying it's the best idea, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% on board with the direction MLS is taking. I'm just saying if that's the goal, if that's what MLS wants to see, then that's where they have to be. They have to be in places like Atlanta, just like they need to be relevant, and this is not happening yet, in places like Dallas.
No, I absolutely agree. And for the same reason, I think they have to be relevant in places like Philadelphia, where they're not yet.
Okay.
But whether or not I think in a place like Philadelphia, which has a lot of the same demographic challenges as Atlanta, where you've got entrenched professional sports teams, where you have large minority populations that are disinterested in the sport traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the same college aspects except for basketball. In places like that, the deck's already stacked against you. You go to Atlanta, where you have the SEC, where you have an even larger demographic shift, where you have NASCAR, where you have teams that do not usually fill their buildings. The Braves, how many times did they fail to sell out during the playoffs? When you face those challenges, why go into an environment where the deck is stacked even further against you?
It's not that I disagree with you. And again, there are probably other markets that are less risky. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Atlanta is the best place for MLS to expand to. I'm just going to look at, because it's a foregone conclusion at this point, because it's a done deal, because the reports are out and April 16th, the date we're looking at for the announcement to be made by MLS, I'm going to look for reasons to believe just a little bit. And again, they have to prove it. That's out there. Atlanta has to prove it as a soccer town. Arthur Blank has to prove it. But there are reasons to believe that it isn't the disaster that everybody assumes it will be. Let me just say that I mean you could be proven right in 10 years, Rick. I don't know if it's any more likely that I'm right than, well, not right. I'm not saying it's going to be a success. I'm just looking for those small silver linings in the situation at hand. Number one, Arthur Blake's got money. If he puts it into it, that could be a major factor. MLS is going to be the cheapest professional sports ticket in town outside of the Silverbacks, and who knows what's going to happen to them. And they're not a major, in a top league right now. You do have shifting demographics in Atlanta. I mean, again, I think that there's reason to say it's not a disaster. And if you were going to plot out the development of MLS and the expansion process of MLS, getting to Atlanta now in what will be in 20 years, 21 years when they finally kick off, seems sort of about right, considering there will be Team 22.
No, within that context, you have a persuasive argument there within that context. And I mean, there are positives that you can look at. I mean, Blank does have money if he spends it differently than Kraft has. And you do have a tradition of soccer at UGA and Georgia State and several other schools in the area. I just don't see them overcoming the challenges, but I mean, reasonable people can disagree on that.
All right. I appreciate the phone call and the perspective, Rick. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
Look, I'm giving Atlanta the benefit of the doubt because I don't just want to sit here and use old tropes and assume this is going to be a disaster. Again, it doesn't seem good. You got the NFL stadium and the turf and the history of Atlanta sports and the South in general. Let's be careful about painting the South with a broad brush there. I certainly spent enough time in the South to have feelings about the South, but it's not a monolithic concept. There are significant differences between Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Just because we call it the South, everybody else who lives in places that aren't the South, just because we call them we call the whole region the South, doesn't mean that all of those people think the same way or that soccer isn't popular in significant pockets. Mike on Twitter, how does someone define Atlanta's success? Are crowds the only factor people are considering? It's a good question. Look, and there's a line here. There's obviously a line. If Atlanta does 10,000 people per match, we're going to all hold up our hands and say, look at that. It's a disaster. You got 10,000 people. The Colorado Rapids do better. San Jose in their old little building, because they'll be in their new stadium by then, did better than that. So you need to do better than 10,000. But where's it? 15,000? Right now, the MLS average, I think, is 18 to 19. Obviously, pulled up by Seattle, pulled down by San Jose. It's a wide range. What is success? If Atlanta makes the TV contract, if Atlanta adds $15 million, $20 million to the TV contract because of the pull of Atlanta in the southeastern part of the United States, is that a success by itself? Vince from Toronto, what's up?
Oh, hey, Jason. This is an interesting debate. It's interesting because there's so many different ways to look at Atlanta as a sports town. I mean, it's still my first love up there with soccer and hockey. And, I was there watching every week at how the Atlanta Thrashers were just basically limping to the finish line before they finally moved to Winnipeg.
By the way, that's the second, Vince, that's the second NHL team to move from Atlanta. They had the Flames before Calgary did.
Yeah. And I get the ownership that the Atlanta Thrashers had was horrible. It was terrible. They right out of the gate, you didn't feel like that this franchise was going to work. And then near the end, their superstar player and their captain said, "I don't want to be here anymore." And he ended up Kovalchuk, and he ended up going to New Jersey. And then by the end of it, people were just like, "Yeah, put it out of its misery." And I don't like being a negative dude, because I feel like I am more negative than I probably should be. But I mean, and I'll tell you right now, Jason, I don't have high hopes for Miami as a sports town.
Okay.
And what Miami has going for it, at least, is that Sox Stadium that I'm assuming is going to have grass on it, and David Beckham's leading the way, and doesn't get any bigger than David Beckham when it comes to soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear all these things about Arthur Blank, how he loves soccer, how he's going to support this team, how he's going to help it. What I wonder is, I have a question for you, Jason, because I'm not a big NFL guy. How successful are the Atlanta Falcons?
Well, they go back and forth. I mean, they've been relatively successful over the last couple of years. They had a bad year last season. They've had some drama. They obviously had Mike Vick back in the day, and obviously that didn't end well. And they've been questionable. They've been middle of the pack in terms of performance over maybe a 10-year stretch. We'll say it that way.
So what I'm worried about is, if, let's say, the Falcons struggle for whatever reason, Arthur Blank would end up putting all his energy into that team, while completely ignoring this newly formed team in Atlanta.
Well, how would that
and
even
what
work?
Ends up happening is
but Vince,
so
how would that even? You say that, and look, we could argue that Stan Kroenke ignores the Colorado Rapids for the most part, and yet that team won an MLS Cup. Maybe playing ugly soccer, they still won an MLS Cup. They've made some investment, and yeah, you could argue that Kroenke hasn't done what he really needs to do in Colorado to make that team relevant and successful. But Arthur Blank is a really, really rich dude. If he is going to commit this money, or any money, and remember, in order to be successful in MLS, you're really not talking about spending much more than $10 million, and that's $7 million over the salary cap on a couple of DP players. You're limited in what you can do. So it's not. All I'm saying is, if he puts the right people in place, and that's a major factor here, hire the correct soccer people. If he does that, they have every opportunity to be as successful as any MLS team, whether Arthur Blank cares or not.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I might be looking at Arthur Blank through craft glasses.
Okay, there's that.
And
yeah.
I don't necessarily think the two are, because I don't know how involved Kraft was at the beginning when MLS formed. Was he involved with the New England Revolution, or was he threw some money at it and then said go?
Robert Kraft is one of the original investors in MLS. He is a godfather of MLS. He is an OG, as I call him, and he gets a lot of leeway from the league office, and he's got connections to Garber and obviously Gulati, and that gives him some leeway to treat that team the way he does. And we've reached the point where we're not taking it anymore, and certainly Revs fans are frustrated, but you have to give Kraft credit for being willing to put the money down to keep the league afloat when it was struggling the most. And to start, I mean, at the beginning of it. So, yeah, I don't think it's fair to sort of take Arthur Blank and say he's going to be Robert Kraft 2.0, because we don't. I mean, it's a different set of circumstances. And again, if the league is convinced that Blank's going to put his money where his mouth is, he needs to do that. He absolutely needs to do that. I'm hesitant to call this a disaster in waiting until I see what they do with this team. And I'd rather them be in a soccer-specific stadium. I'd rather them play on grass. I'd rather it be a team given every opportunity to stand on its own 2 feet. But then again, we have a precedent with the Seattle Sounders and the Seahawks, and they work together to create a phenomenon in Seattle. It's a different town, Atlanta. But why not Atlanta? And as a couple of people have said, and I brought it up, if MLS succeeds in Atlanta, treat it as a challenge for North American soccer. If MLS succeeds in Atlanta, well, damn. I mean, maybe that's what proves that soccer has made it in this country or this part of the world. Vince, apologies.
Yeah, you always have to hope for the best, and I assume Garber knows what he's doing. Obviously he's not an idiot. He knows what Atlanta is, and he knows. I'm guessing he knows the town and its sports demographics, and how a lot of sports have not succeeded in that town. So he's not closing his eyes and jumping in. I'm sure he's
a lot of people
done a lot of work.
A lot of people will contest your theory that Garber knows what he's doing. I mean, I think you have to give him credit for everything that MLS has become over the last 10 years. I think you have to give Garber a lot of credit for that. And maybe he doesn't have enough credit to put a team in Atlanta. And this isn't just on him, by the way. Everything that MLS does is as a collective. But maybe he just doesn't have enough credit because Atlanta scares so many people. And again, the situation of it, the NFL owner, the NFL stadium, the artificial turf, the weird setup in the stadium. Again, there are a lot of reasons to be doubtful that this is going to be overwhelming success. And the bar is very, very high, Vince. I mean, that's the problem here too, right? Toronto, Seattle, Portland, Philadelphia, these cities have all, Montreal to a little bit lesser extent maybe, Vancouver certainly doing very well. They've all set a very high bar for what an MLS expansion franchise is supposed to look like coming out of the gates. And it almost doesn't matter how good these teams are when they start. We expect this level of enthusiasm and 20,000 people in the stands every week because that's what has happened. And we have sort of taken that as a part of the MLS expansion procedure. And maybe it should be. Maybe we should be holding Atlanta to that standard. Why wouldn't we? This is the way it's been everywhere else. We're gonna watch Orlando closely. They're gonna start somewhere else. We'll see how many fans they get in that building, and then when they move into their new place, we're gonna see if they sell it out. We're going to see if all of this enthusiasm and talk and everything behind them is warranted. And Orlando has to live up to the same standard that Portland and Montreal and Seattle and everybody else and Philadelphia have set. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years in the southeastern United States for soccer. If you buy the theory that Southerners don't like soccer, well, you're about to either you have your theory refuted or you're going to be proven right, I suppose. Although the word Southerner is a questionable word to use in a country that is changing demographics so quickly. So quickly. I mean, this is a vast portion of the United States that has been, again, painted with a broad brush. Some shared history, sure. But is Atlanta, Georgia of 2014 the same Atlanta, Georgia of 2000, of 1990, of 1970, of 1965, of 1940? No, of course it's not, because your city isn't the same city it was 20 years ago. But we are slow to relinquish those old diehard beliefs that the South doesn't like soccer. I have my own personal experience. I quit soccer when I moved to the South. I actually started playing soccer in the South, but moved to a different part of the South and quit soccer because they didn't care. The standard wasn't good enough for me. Mike on Twitter, how much of the Atlanta-Miami fear is soccer fans' inferiority complex and not wanting to look bad? I bet you it's some of it. Mike. Aunt T is on the line. What's up?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
What I've been looking at for some years now is that where it seems to be apparent that the MLS has been successful is where people use public transportation.
Okay.
I think I see there a connection there between those two things. Portland, very much so.
Okay.
Seattle, yes.
Okay.
Vancouver, yes. Of course, then we have LA, has been successful. Not a public transportation city.
Sure.
Definitely not.
Sure. I think that's an obvious connection to make, but I don't know that it should be the first thing we go to. I mean, I get it.
Causality, or is it just
Right. I mean, and every city has a distinct character. I mean, that's part of what's going to make the league stronger, sort of the diversity of the markets. I mean, Houston is a very different soccer town than Portland, but they're both successful in their own ways. And again, you know, that's my fear here, is that we're going to these old stereotypes and that we're jumping to these what soccer is supposed to be and what soccer is in America. Again, I'm not saying Atlanta is going to be a success, and I'm as worried as most people are for reasons that aren't necessarily about that old belief that Southerners don't like soccer or that Atlanta's not a good sports town. There's some other things. Producer Trevor's got a concern about the sports media landscape there. That's an obvious concern, but you can't tell me that Houston is getting significant coverage in the sports media in that town, but yet they're successful. There are a lot of teams where the sports media essentially ignores their MLS team, and they're still doing okay. It's a goal of soccer to sort of break into the national conversation. So I don't think that that's the end all. It's a problem. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the end all be all. And if you want to point to a positive, the fact that Arthur Blank's involved and he owns the Atlanta Falcons will actually help the MLS team get some press it might not otherwise get.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to say is that you talked about Peterson, the NASL commissioner, and in a way, I do feel that he has a right to be a little bit pissed at Garber and his company, because it really you get the sense that they are kind of running over these guys who are running NASL.
I don't disagree with that, and I'm sure the NASL offices people are throwing darts at a picture of Don Garber right now as we speak, and I don't necessarily blame them, but the problem is that in American soccer has been very fractured for a very long time, and while I don't want to drag this into an argument about connecting the tiers and promotion and relegation, I will say that American soccer has had problems with distinct leagues working together for long enough that I'm not going to lay this at the feet of Don Garber. I think MLS needs to look out for itself, and we need to establish the first division as an ongoing, legitimate, big-time concern before we start worrying about whether or not the second division is being left out in the cold. And honestly, if the Silverbacks were a bigger deal, then this wouldn't be happening in this manner. Now, it's sort of also happening in Miami. But here's another point in MLS's favor. And again, I'm not really defending them running over the NASL. But in San Antonio, you have fans actively advocating for an MLS team when they already have this successful NASL team. I mean, it just goes to show you, until these leagues can work together, whoever you want to blame, it's going to be a problem that MLS is going to go and snake markets away from the second division.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, Impact was the first team to leave NASL and to go to MLS, and you don't hear them like moaning about that happening, because it was the owner's choice and it went that way. But
I don't know about that. I think that even though Saputo was involved in the move to MLS, and the same thing goes for Merritt Paulson in Portland and everything that happened in Seattle and Vancouver, I still think that those second division guys are pretty upset. I gotta go, man. I appreciate the phone call.
Okay.
That's Auntie, our Finnish friend there. Let's take a break. When we come back, the man who broke the Atlanta story, Jonathan Tannenwald of Philly.com, will join us. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Philadelphia soccer as well. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Like on Soccer Morning, once again, thanks to John O'Shea for the music today. That's Safe in LA by, who is it? Gold Motel. Jonathan Tannenwald is with me from Philly.com. He's still got his sweet iced tea from Wawa in front of his camera shot there at the Philly.com newsroom. And he's making a point. Sweet iced tea coming to MLS via the Atlanta franchise. I know they love their sweet tea in the South, John, but it kind of gets us to the point that some people are bringing up. And by the way, John broke the story over at Philly.com that MLS is going to Atlanta. The announcement coming very shortly. People are painting the South with a broad brush when it comes to soccer, John. Is it fair or not?
No.
And why not? Let's go into the whys then.
If anybody of your listenership has been to Charleston, then they've been to the South and they've been to a city that loves soccer. If anybody over the years has been to Birmingham, Alabama for a U.S. national team game when Legion Field used to host them regularly, then you've been to the South and you've seen that they like soccer down there. Look, I think that, as you said, in fact, you stole a lot of the lines I was going to use on the segment. Atlanta has a very high bar to reach, and it should have a very high bar to reach because a lot of other markets in Major League Soccer have set the bar that high. But the more I think about it, the more I talk to people, the more I think about the fact that this team will draw not only from Atlanta and from Georgia, but from Alabama and Tennessee and Mississippi and South Carolina, the more I think that they might just have a shot.
Look, again, I think the idea for any Atlanta sports franchise, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever, is that it's meant to be a regional team, that Atlanta has a regional power that a lot of cities in this country don't have. And while he did not work out for hockey, and we can sort of go into the cultural reasons for that, I think let's say this: if people want to bring up the Thrashers and the Flames in a history of hockey in Atlanta and use it against an MLS team there, soccer is much more embedded in the culture of Georgia than hockey ever was. And obviously that's an access thing. You can go out and kick a ball in Georgia, even when it's 110 degrees and 100% humidity. You can't go play hockey very often in Georgia.
Hockey's not necessarily succeeding in Miami. It's
Okay.
succeeding in Tampa because they won a Stanley Cup, and it's succeeding in Nashville and Raleigh because they've got populations that have embraced the sport. I think that those are more the exceptions than the rules. They probably say so as much themselves. And that's why in my writing, I stuck to the Braves as the only team that I think you can fairly compare this to.
And what are those comparison points that we want to make here if we're going to talk about why this may or may not be a success?
I hate to say this. I'm going to get a lot of flack from people for it, but I think people in Atlanta know it's true. People don't go to Braves games in the numbers that you would expect a team that is perennially among the elite in Major League Baseball to do. And one of the reasons why, and stop me if you've heard this line before, is that their stadium is too big for them.
Okay.
It seats 50,000 people. You all might remember that Turner Field was converted from the old Olympic Stadium that hosted the opening ceremonies in the track in 1996.
Right.
It seats 50,000 some odd. It's the fourth largest stadium in Major League Baseball. There's no reason for it to be that big.
Right.
And the new stadium that the Braves are going to build in Cobb County out in the suburbs, I presume, is going to be a lot smaller. And oh, by the way, I got an email from somebody who lives in Atlanta and goes to a lot of Braves games, who's also a soccer fan, who told me that if this MLS team is smart, they can capitalize on folks who live closer into the city and don't want to go out to the Braves Stadium.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the Braves move to Cobb County is an indication of the shifting demographics of that city, and that plays into MLS's advantage. Whether or not that means the team will be a success remains to be seen, but we at least have a reason to see this as a possible success story. And yeah, the bar is high, as you mentioned, and Atlanta has a lot to overcome reputation-wise. But if you really dig down into the changing elements of that town, and I got a couple people on Twitter, Curry Cole Smith, Atlanta is an international city whose demographics support MLS. In town, Atlanta fans have been abandoned by the Braves. Atlanta Soccer Fest. We are a city that is ready for MLS. We just need to make sure we can get there on MARTA, which is their public transportation.
Which they're going to be able to do.
Right.
And that is, I think, a pretty big deal. And I'll throw this in also about the Braves and moving to Cobb County. There's a lot of people who think the Braves fan base was already in Cobb County,
Right.
and out that way, and not closer into the city for a lot of reasons.
It's a strange town. I mean, in the aftermath of, and again, I've never lived there, and I'm not going to presume to be an expert in Atlanta. And I certainly would hope that we can get some people who live in Atlanta and can speak to the soccer community there and why this makes sense for MLS and for soccer fans in Atlanta. In the aftermath of the snowstorm, ice storm, whatever that was that hit Atlanta and wrecked all of their transportation, their commute, and had people hours and hours on the road. We sort of got a peek. I got a peek of what that city has been going through the last couple of years or last couple of decades. And it doesn't really dissuade me from the belief that there's a possibility here that this makes sense. Now, let's get to the practical elements of why it's happening.
Can I ask you
now.
one more question
Sure.
real quick before we do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Of the people who are bashing this, who are saying it'll never work, who are saying that Atlanta is terrible and cannot accommodate soccer, and are ignoring the youth soccer community that is down there, one of whose products just left Philadelphia rather prominently, as we'll get to in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And are also ignoring the Hispanic population down there and are sort of writing them off.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them live north of Richmond?
A lot of them.
How many of them live north of the Mason-Dixon line?
A lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them do. Again, I mean, I think that it's not unfair. It's not wrong for people who don't live in Atlanta or haven't spent significant time in Atlanta to have questions about Atlanta. There are plenty of reasons to wonder if this is the right move for MLS. But at the same time, if we're going to be fair and even-handed about this, we should absolutely look deeper into what is different about it, the Atlanta that people have in their heads, and whether or not that can make this team a success. Again, maybe it doesn't go far enough. Maybe the notion that there's a growing Hispanic community doesn't mean anything necessarily for the MLS team. We know that MLS has not always done a great job of capturing that Hispanic market, and we know that I just saw, I hadn't planned on mentioning this, Jonathan, but 538.com, Nate Silver's site, just did a review of Facebook likes in order to determine the most popular teams from North America in professional sports, and they determined that Liga MX is the fifth most popular league in America, essentially. And that tells you that at least when it comes to Mexican Americans and the Mexican American fan base, MLS hasn't done a good job. That doesn't mean that they can't capture other elements of the Hispanic community. I'm just saying that MLS needs to do a better job of that. But there are reasons to look at this and say they have the building blocks. It just like any other MLS expansion opportunity, it's going to require commitment and intelligence and marketing. But I don't know that Atlanta's really that much of a tough nut to crack as much tougher nut to crack than Miami is, or even Orlando was before Orlando City arrived.
You know what the best comparison is for me to Atlanta? It's going into Philadelphia in 2010.
Okay.
Going into a big market with a sports culture that is very, very firmly entrenched and is hard to carve out a niche from. In Philadelphia, you've got the four major pro sports and college sports. In Atlanta, you've got SEC football and SEC football and SEC football and the Falcons, the Braves, and the Masters, and NASCAR.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, here's a good time to remind folks that the MLS Cup and the SEC title game are on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven forbid Atlanta hosts an MLS Cup final on that Saturday.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Stadium as the SEC title game.
Yeah, that would be a problem. Well, look, I mean, again, MLS is going to have those issues on a regular basis, and I get why it's easy to criticize the league when those conflicts happen. Hopefully they can work out some scheduling things. Again, to the practical issues at hand, and part of it's not just about demographics in Atlanta as a sports town and the tough media market that they're going to face. It's also the stadium, the turf, and the owner, Jonathan. And Arthur Blank is the rich guy. He's got that going for him. He's an Atlanta guy. It's not like he's, sorry to use this term, it's not like he's a carpetbagger. The guy's a fixture there. He owns the Falcons, everything else. That doesn't
necessarily the Home Depot, which knows a few things about soccer.
Yeah, he's his company that he founded is shown in it. There are reasons to buy that Arthur Blank cares about soccer, but again, there are also reasons to wonder if an NFL owner is the right guy. and the stadium and the turf. How concerned should MLS fans be about the MLS 1.0 feel of those elements?
Of all the things I'm most concerned about, turf. That probably tells you something, that the stadium is not the number one concern for two reasons. Even though I think that they might probably have more seats in the lower bowl than would make sense for soccer under the design of sort of the BC Place style tarping off the upper deck.
Mm-hmm.
If I read these renderings right, it's going to be a retractable roof stadium. And so that will not necessarily, people are not going to say, oh, I don't want to sit outside on a Saturday night. They'll close the roof and they'll air condition the place.
Right.
That'll help. And Arthur Blank, to his credit, the Falcons were not always a team that sold out every game every week, but they certainly have for a long time under his ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it is the least of my worries, in that he seems to be pretty good at getting folks in Atlanta to turn out to events that he helps run.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. The bar's high. I'm not going to rule it out, and I'm certainly not, as some of your Twitter followers and emails and so forth said, I'm not going to just write off the entire South because I'm not from there.
Our friend Aaron Stoller, who is definitely a skeptic when it comes to Atlanta and MLS,
lives north of Richmond, as he'll admit.
Yes, he believes that this is just about Arthur Blank filling dates in a new stadium. Do you think it's down to that simple fact?
No.
Okay.
No.
Is there anything? The only way for him to mollify those fears is to be an out front presence on this soccer venture. He can't be the silent owner of an MLS team in Atlanta and have it be a Robert Kraft situation. He's got to be involved. He's got to show an enthusiasm. He's got to put his he doesn't have to be Merritt Paulson or Rob Heineman or any of those guys, but he does need to be involved, and he needs to be public about it.
I agree with that. And you know what else he could do is get a very large activate some of the big Fortune 500 companies in Atlanta to be corporate sponsors of MLS, and use his connections to bring new money into the league. And also, in the long run, if this thing does succeed, and Turner Sports starts paying attention,
sure,
that could prove very, very beneficial for MLS.
Yeah.
That's a long play, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
But David Levy, who's the president of Turner Sports, is pretty smart. And if they can do for MLS what they've done for the NCAA tournament at some point down the road, that could be pretty nice.
Trevor's concerns, and he mentions this here to me, the mention of youth soccer, which I have not said. I said there's a youth soccer community, but I'm not saying that means MLS is going to be a success. I'm just saying that culturally, soccer is part of what's going on in Georgia, at least, and even wider at Alabama and the Carolinas and northern Florida, which is all within the reach of Atlanta. I'm not saying that that community is going to feed the fan base of Atlanta MLS right away. I'm just saying that culturally soccer matters. And the mention of the growing Hispanic population sound like MLS 1.0 features. And I don't disagree with that. And I will say, and I'm seeing some evidence of it out there, we need to see, just like we did in Portland and Seattle and Philadelphia and Orlando and Montreal, we need to see that grassroots MLS soccer fan community rise up, whether it's out of the Silverbacks thing or not, and show that this town is more than just a couple of demographics that we used to think would make MLS a success.
I think in the case of the Hispanic population, we still do. And there is a young professional population in Atlanta, and it's pretty big. We're going to find out just how much soccer fans there are down there in that population. I'll say this about Philadelphia, and I know they had the Sons of Ben that were the driving force, to get the union in, guaranteeing 5,000 season tickets and stuff like that. There was an enormous amount of skepticism when the union started here. But the skepticism was here. It wasn't, Atlanta's sort of the inverse.
Yeah, I see what you're
in
saying.
that way. The skepticism about Atlanta is from everywhere else.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia, everywhere else thought it was going to be a smashing success because they all see Philadelphia as being this great sports town. But here, there was a lot of skepticism. And oh, by the way, there is still a lot of skepticism in the team's fifth season.
Sure. And then there's I think the element of where the stadium is in relation to the city and all of those things. And what you can say, again, whether or not you like the NFL stadium concept, there are two things working. There are a couple of things working for it. One I didn't mention. You mentioned it, the roof. If you're going to continue to play through the summer in the American soccer season, you don't want to be playing outdoors in the summer in Atlanta. You do not want to be doing that. And
certainly not for a sport that you got to run around as much as
you're going to see. And I'm excited about Orlando, and they've built something. But you're going to see when they're playing in an outdoor soccer-specific stadium, again, it's going to be 90 to 95 degrees with 100% humidity. We're going to see how much that slows the soccer down. Atlanta can sort of be the southeastern team that doesn't have to play like that, which would be nice. So there's that. And for the fans as well. Ask people who go out to those Houston Dynamo games in the middle of the summer who are committed but end up losing 10 pounds when they go to watch that game. Atlanta almost had to have a roof in order to make it work. I mean, if you're going to wonder about the city as a sports market, then it has to have a roof for soccer in the middle of the summer. Has to.
Probably has to have a roof for football too. Has to have a roof for a lot.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Now, again, Arthur Blank, how much? I mean, this guesswork, and I know that MLS has yet to comment on this. We're targeting an April 16th date for the announcement. How much do you think Arthur Blank is paying to get into this league?
I have no idea.
Okay, no speculation. All right, I understand. I like to throw those numbers out there. It is interesting, and something else that I mentioned and came up with a couple of callers. The relationship between MLS and NASL is not going to get any better because of this.
No.
Was it already irredeemable? Let me say it that way.
I'm not going to say it was already irredeemable in quotes. Obviously, they're loaning players back and forth, to some degree. But I don't think that the folks at MLS headquarters, I'm not going to put it that way. I have said before that there is a fairly strong division in the American soccer community between those on the side of Soccer United Marketing and those on the side of Traffic Sports.
Okay.
The NASL is Traffic Sports' baby. Mm-hmm. That's as far as I'm going.
Okay, fair enough. Let's shift from Atlanta. We've done an hour on Atlanta, which wasn't really my intention. We had to get your perspective here. Let's shift to Philadelphia soccer specifically. You mentioned one of those Georgia soccer products, Jack McInerney. Obviously, a bit of a phenom. Entered MLS as a very young player, straight out of high school. Made a bit of a splash. Struggled as young players want to do with consistency, and now he's out. He's been traded to the Montreal Impact for Andrew Wenger, former number 1 pick, Duke product, who is sort of the opposite of Jack Mack when it comes to development. Why? Let's get down to the whys here, Jonathan.
Let's see how much I can say on the record. I think that there are certain elements of McInerney's demeanor that were growing a little bit tiring around the Union. And I think we saw some of that come out, including among the fan base, by the way. We saw some of that come out on Saturday during the Union Fire game when a lot of people were praising Maurice Adu and Leo Fernandez and some of the other guys who were playing for the Union who were getting things done a little better than McInerney did. And I know he had the sort of second half of 2012 and the first half of 2013 goal scoring spurt, but I have said for some time that I think he was the Union's leading goal scorer by default.
Okay.
Not because he really had the talent or the skill or the work ethic. And, he's dropped a couple of hints in interviews in recent weeks and months. One in the offseason where he said he wanted a good through ball. He said many times last year that he'd rather play in a 4-4-2 and a 4-2-3-1. Now he's telling the Philly soccer page that he wants a true number 10 behind him. Well, there's not many of those in Major League Soccer, never mind the rest of the sport around the world, never mind the U.S. national team.
Sure.
So I said at the start of the year, he's got to grow up. He's got to convert the chances that are not just exactly where he wants them. And I know he wants to play, and I know he wants to get chances, but if Montreal keeps playing a 4-2-3-1, for as much as he'll learn from Marco Di Vaio in practice, he's not going to play in games all that much, unless he comes on as a substitute. Mm-hmm. And it's a very different game when he's the one at the top instead of a Di Vaio or even a Wenger. And the question is going to be, which is more likely to happen? John Hackworth to unlock the potential of Andrew Wenger or Frank Klopas to unlock the potential of Jack McInerney? We'll see. Mm-hmm. John Hackworth said last week that I'm going to see if I pull a quote up real quick. He had acknowledged that, this could backfire on him. But I think that the time was right to make the move. And you also have the fact that he's got this one option year left on his contract that's would have hit the Union for a lot of money. I've heard, it's been reported, up to $400,000, getting close to the designated player threshold. That all being the case, is he worth that much money? I don't think he is.
No, I'm with you, and I'm actually, I know a lot of people jump to the immediate conclusion: Philadelphia, what are you doing? Montreal won this trade. I don't know why anybody would do that before we see how these two players actually play for their teams. But I actually think that for both of these guys, Andrew Winger as well, this is a change of scenery, could be beneficial type of situation.
Yes.
McInerney has worn out his welcome in Philadelphia. I was certainly aware of some of that. Whatever happened with him in Hackworth, a general malaise, a general a general not getting along with the situation in Philadelphia. And then Andrew Winger, number 1 overall pick, a guy with a lot of talent who really wasn't getting what I would call his fair shake in Montreal for a lot of reasons. And maybe it's not all a criticism of the impact. Sometimes it's just circumstance. But now he'll get a chance in Philadelphia with a team that needs forwards, with a team that needs goals from their forwards, to prove himself.
And look, I think that Wenger has been hurt by, among other things, the coaching carousel in Montreal. He's played for 3 different coaches now with 3 completely different styles.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to help a guy who's still pretty new as a pro. And look, Andrew Wenger is a smart guy, a really hard worker. I know he gets a lot of flack from people in Canada for not having the football skill of Marco Di Vaio. Well, how many players in Major League Soccer have the football skill of Marco Di Vaio?
0.
I'll count one.
Robbie Keane,
Jermaine Defoe.
Okay, Jermaine Defoe.
Keane.
Maybe
That's
Robbie Keane. Yeah, there are. Yeah, you watch Marco Di Vaio, and that's the other. The encouraging thing for fans, American fans who hope that Jack McInerney will somehow bloom into a striker prospect for the national team, which I think he's a long ways away from right now, and still was even when he was on that Gold Cup roster last year, is that he'll learn something from Marco Di Vaio. And maybe one of those things he learns is to keep his head down and do his job, which I'm not saying anything from experience that I know he's not doing that. He wasn't doing that in Philadelphia. Just saying that certainly Di Vaio shows up, does his job, is a professional about it, and there's no doubts about his ability, and Jack Mack could learn from that. In terms of where the Union sit right now, and this is a shakeup, and this is a bit of drama that they may not have wanted, although you imagine that this is addition by subtraction in a lot of ways. How has the beginning of the season gone? And living up to expectations, I imagine.
It's tough to say. I mean, they've blown 3 leads now, and dropped probably, I'd say 4, if not all 6, but they've dropped at least 4 points so far this season that they could have had.
Yeah.
I still think they make the playoffs. I still think they've got the talent, but what we really got to see now is how Andrew Wenger fits in at the top of that sort of 4-2-3-1.
Yep, got to figure out how to get those goals. Jonathan Tannenwald, Philly.com, broke Atlanta MLS story, here to talk some Union, and a fantastic guest as always. Thanks for your time, Jonathan. I appreciate it,
Pleasure
sir.
as always.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will open up the phone lines. More thoughts in Atlanta, Premier League weekend, lots of happenings around the world of soccer. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Let's go. Let's open up the phone lines. 347-756-6276. You can talk about Atlanta if you want to still talk about Atlanta and MLS. I got some Atlanta people hitting me up on Twitter, letting me know that they believe that this is going to be a success. We'll see. If you're in Atlanta, you want to give me a phone call and you want to defend your city, absolutely do that. In the meantime, here's your task. What should they be called? What should Atlanta's team be called? Let's not do Atlanta FC. That's boring. No. I mean, I guess it's fine, and the fans can create the imaging and the whatever. No Atlanta FC. Something different. I've seen Terminus out there, Atlanta Terminus or Terminus FC for that. I guess is something working for it. Atlanta Apollo is some designs I saw. These things are bouncing around on the internet. I wonder what they should be called. I wonder what I have at least one fan of the Silverbacks who's saying have the Silverbacks take 25% of the ownership, keep the name and fans, and gain more Silverbacks FC. I never really got this Silverbacks thing. I never really understood. Is there some connection I'm missing? What's the Silverbacks thing all about? It's an odd name for I like their current badge. It's an odd name for a team. I don't really understand that. Atlanta MLS is definitely out there. MLS in general this weekend, the round of games we just got. You got thoughts on these things? Let's go here. Portland and Seattle 4-4 in the Cascadia Derby game. Clint Dempsey with a hat trick. Diego Chara with 2 goals. Back and forth. Fantastic, entertaining soccer. Was it the best quality soccer? No, of course it wasn't. Who cares? Sometimes, and it wasn't bad soccer either. I mean, sometimes you get bad soccer that's really entertaining because it's bad. It's back and forth. The defending is terrible. This was sort of in the middle. A nice little mix. Decent soccer, some smart play, some bad defending, but some smart play, coupled with entertainment. Goals. Goals aren't everything, but they do matter. They do have an impact on how fun a game is. 404, you're on the air.
Hey, what's going on, Jason?
What's up? Who's this?
It's Daniel calling from Atlanta.
What's up, man?
Hey, no, you were asking where the Silverbacks name came from. It came from an actual beloved gorilla at the Atlanta Zoo.
Okay. All right. Hey, that's cool with me. I didn't realize that there was an actual animal behind the name, but that's all right. That's cool. Would you want to see the MLS team name this? I don't think it can happen, by the way. But would you like to see the MLS team named the Silverbacks, or you want to go with something else?
I mean, something else, as long as it doesn't alienate the whole soccer population. You know, not another Chivas USA.
No,
not
sure.
a New York City FC. Something different. Something that doesn't have a connection to something else. You know, not an MLS being a baby to Liga MX or to Liga to fucking what's it called? EPL.
Yeah, I got you, man. Absolutely. We can't look. We're going to see what happens with New York City FC sort of being a subsidiary of Manchester City. Well, we don't want to do that in Atlanta. I think you're absolutely right. I think while that may or may not work in New York, it certainly wouldn't work in Atlanta. They need to be their own thing. I don't see any reason why they won't be. So I guess we need to be careful here with this team. Again, they could go with something boring like Atlanta FC. But I don't know that really gives that team any identity, and you got to have some identity.
Yeah, of course you got to have some identity. I mean, Atlanta FC is boring. FC Atlanta is boring. Something unique. Something that we haven't heard of in a while. You know, like probably another United or Atlanta City something. You know, but FC is boring. It's getting to the point where you want to name all the teams FC all the time, every day, all day, you know?
Yeah.
And it's getting a bit boring.
I got some people suggesting Atlanta 1845. Those year things are interesting when you pull in the city. You know the history of the Houston Dynamo. One point they were going to work in a year into their name, and it upset some people in that town, and they ended up having to change it. I don't know if that's going to fly. Quantico 2005. So is it going to work? Tell me right now. Is it going to work in an NFL building on the plastic turf with the bed sheets? Is it going to work?
Maybe.
You live there and you're not convinced? This is troubling news.
I mean, I'll make the best to come out and support the new Atlanta team. I mean, I'll try and be there at every single game, you know, as long as I have another commitment. But for them to succeed in Atlanta, you know, I don't know. They would have to have some amazing DP to come in from, I don't know, Liga MX or EPL and just tear it up like the Foes doing in Toronto or something similar, you know?
So you think star power matters a lot?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably true. I mean, I think you're going to have to get a name or two. How big a name you can get, that's a question. What kind of name you can attract to Atlanta? I mean, Atlanta's a cosmopolitan international town. Let's not act like it's some kind of backwater down south anymore. It never really was, but especially now it's not. Here's some ideas. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that. I mean, Atlanta is diverse. I mean, you have Hispanics living in Atlanta. You got whites, African Americans, and then you also have Koreans. You know that live in north of Atlanta. Okay. And you know, you have to target everybody. You know, you can't just, like I said before, you can't just alienate.
Sure.
You know, certain demographics.
Yeah, no, I'm getting all these names. Atlanta Chiefs, which would obviously be a call back to the NASL days. I don't think you really want to do that, considering the Native American issues there. Atlanta Locomotive SC from Joe Patrick. Aquemini FC. Dogwood City. I'd be all right with some. I'd be all right with some outcast imagery, but I don't think they're going to go that direction. Dogwood City SC, Atlanta Falcons SC. That's Vince being a jerk up there in Toronto.
Being an ass.
Yeah, I appreciate the phone call, man. You know, I'm getting the sense that you're not necessarily excited, but are you also a Silverbacks guy?
I mean, I live northwest of Atlanta. I live in the city where they're going to build the new Braves stadium.
Okay.
So it'll be easier for me to go see a Braves game than it would be for an Atlanta game. But I love soccer. You know, soccer is my sport at home. It's the sport I tell my mother to watch, and she watches with me all the time, especially when there's a MLS game on Unimas and shit like that. You know, but I mean, you know, it'll be easy on my wallet to take the bus, to take a MARTA and be there as long as I don't have another commitment, you know? And that's really, I don't know. Really it, really.
I appreciate the phone call, man. I like the kind of the average soccer fan in Atlanta attitude. I appreciate that. Because I do look, there are obviously people who are extremely excited. There are people who are going nuts right now that Atlanta's going to get an MLS team. And if you look at Twitter, and I think the hashtag is ATL wants MLS, there are a lot of people, you know, expressing excitement. I'm going to buy season tickets. I'm going to these games. Now, I'm not going to take what's happening on Twitter as some indication that this team is going to be a success. Let's not do that. It's just like it doesn't mean a lot when some soccer topic is trending nationally. Oh, look, the guy who scored the goal for the national team is trending nationally. Okay. That means 1% of Twitter has mentioned his name. What does that mean exactly? Not even 1%. Something smaller than that. So, yeah, this is great. Jack Sweeney, it's about time. Atlanta wants MLS. Aaron Roach, being from Carolina, it's so great to see Atlanta get a team. Robin, Arg, we should be trending by now. Colin, hitting the hashtag. John Powell wants to know what it should be called. Irish Joe, congratulating the Terminus Legion. So, look, it's out there. There's something happening. Whether or not it's enough to push this team to the heights that we expect MLS expansion franchises to hit, because that's it. This is a high bar. You're gonna reach that Portland level? Probably not, but you better get damn close. Otherwise, people are gonna call you a failure. And MLS is pot committed on the Southeast. They're all in on the Southeast, and it sounds like a TV move. Maybe it helps, and if it helps the TV, look, I'll ask you as regular MLS fans outside of Atlanta, pre-existing MLS fans, the average MLS fan, if Atlanta getting a team, and it'd be impossible to prove the connection necessarily, but if Atlanta gets an MLS team and the TV contract goes up by 33%, and that money is invested back in the league, and the salary cap goes up to $5, $7, $10 million, doesn't that make Atlanta a success on some level? Even if they only get 12, 13, 14,000 people a game? Does it? I'm asking. Does the bigger picture, to the benefit of the rest of the league, if Atlanta's involved, and that helps the TV contract because TV networks want to see Atlanta and want to see that Southeast market. Who's this on the line?
Hey, how you doing, Jason? It's Washington.
Washington. Why do you call unknown, man? Are you trying to hide where you're from?
No,
What's
I'm
happening?
not. It says I'm calling from my office line, and the office line is blocked. What can I tell you?
Oh, wait. So you work for like some secret government agency or something?
I do work for the government. I doubt it's a secret.
Oh, okay. All right. What's on your mind, Washington?
Well, no, it's about this Atlanta thing. I agree with you. It's a done deal already. So let's try to get behind it. Let's be positive about this. Do I like playing in an NFL stadium? No, but Seattle Sounders have been doing a great job. The only concern that I have, because it's not even about the size of the stadium, because they've been pretty good about partitioning. And if you go to that Philly.com article, you click on the partition, and it actually looks pretty cool. It looks like they've done a pretty good job at it. The thing that concerns me the most with playing in an NFL stadium is the football, the gridiron football hash marks on the field.
The lines,
that's the only thing. If they can figure out a way, and Seattle's doing pretty good with that. If they can figure out a way to make, work the scheduling out or do whatever so it doesn't appear, especially on television, I'm behind them.
Yeah, the biggest problem we had the last couple of years was last year during the playoffs. Seattle had to play on the obvious lines, not the faded ones that we sometimes get, the completely obvious ones. And look, I think that we overreact a bit about the gridiron lines, but I don't like to see them. They're distracting. They're annoying. I'm not a fan. They shouldn't be there if you can help it. We need to just come up with some technology that can make them make it so that the lines are like projected on the field, and then you can just turn off the switch and they're gone. We got to figure that out.
Good idea.
Where's the technology working on this, Washington? I'm with you. Again, I think that's why MLS fans who have been around for a while or who have seen the last wave of expansion and are judging everything by the Portland, Seattle, Montreal, Vancouver, Philadelphia standard, all of those people, that's what concerns them about this, that it's the NFL stadium, that there's gridiron lines possible, that you're going to get a bad atmosphere. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, there are reasons to be concerned, but we have to wait and see. And again, it's a done deal. If you want to help make it a success, even if you don't live in Atlanta, hype it up. Get people excited somehow. Tell your friends that live in Atlanta or the South somewhere that they should go to a game. Got anything else, Washington?
No, thanks a lot.
All right, man. Appreciate the phone call. Let's see. Let's go to 928. Who's this?
Jason, David Prescott Valley. How you doing?
What's up, David?
Hey, I think this is about the television contract. The television contract that's been sitting out there for a few months that has not been finalized. I think MLS can now go back to that negotiating table and say, hey, look what we got now. We got these three southern cities, especially Atlanta. I'm telling you right now, I think in the next couple of weeks we will finally see the official announcement that new television contract is finalized. And I think this is going to be the thing that's going to push it over the edge for MLS. I don't think there's any coincidence.
Yeah, that may be true, man. I appreciate the phone call. Anything else?
Okay. I was just going to say, I went to the game in Phoenix between U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention real quickly, because people are talking, on some of these blogs about Atlanta and about the fact that they can bring in, 80,000 for a Mexico friendly or whatever. In Phoenix, we can get 59,000, 64,000 for a U.S. Mexico game. But an MLS team in Phoenix would fail miserably, I guarantee you. There's absolutely no connection between the ability to get, a big crowd for a Mexico friendly and to support an MLS team. They're two completely different concepts.
That's very interesting, David in Arizona with his insight. Thanks a lot into that market. I think Phoenix is another town that people will mention, and again, if you're not from there, if you're not familiar with Phoenix, maybe your immediate inclination is that's a good town for MLS, but he thinks otherwise. And again, there's reasons to think that Atlanta's not going to work. I'm not telling you Atlanta's going to be a success. I'm telling you that at this point, there are a couple of reasons to think that it might not be a disaster, and that's about it. That's what we're hanging our hat on. I'm not spinning, and I'll tell you right now, the influences behind this show, Trevor's definitely against this idea completely. I'm not on board yet. They gotta prove it to me. I'm just trying to balance out all of this negativity. Okay, Trevor's not against it. He's skeptical, like most people are. I didn't mean, that's not what I meant. Apologies. I get in trouble when I try to explain what he's saying to me back here. All right, phone line's open for the next 10 minutes, 347-756-6276. We haven't really touched on the fact that Tom Sermanni was fired as U.S. women's national team coach last night after the United States beat China 2-0. What's going on there? Talk about Jack Mack essentially pushing himself out of Philadelphia, getting traded by the union because of an attitude problem. I'm not saying that it's a negative because we don't know what Sermani was doing behind the scenes and don't know whether or not he was really impacting that team in a positive manner. But he wasn't tinkering. He wasn't messing around with old stuff that the U.S. women's national team had been doing. And all indications are that the core, the veteran core, the power base of that team when it came to the players ousted Tom Sermani. And I guess the question when it comes to that is whether or not U.S. Soccer, Sino Galati, whoever pulled the trigger, whether or not they have to accede to the players' wishes. The players are coming and saying, this is a disaster. We have no direction. We don't know what he's doing. He's not communicating well enough. You've got to make a change. Where does the federation's responsibility lie? Backing the coach they think can possibly change the way the team plays and make them more successful and potentially go win a World Cup? Or to the players who aren't going anywhere? You can't change the players. Certainly not the best ones. If that's not, if they say it's not working, if there's more than one, there's 3, 4, 5 players who come to the federation and say it's not working, got to get rid of him. Do they immediately just have to say you're right, or we're listening? Here, let's make that change. Because you are giving the players an inordinate amount of power in that situation. This is not, obviously this is a dynamic that has happened across many teams, across many sports. Sometimes it's one individual player. Sometimes it's a group of players. Sometimes the head coach rubs some people the wrong way. Sometimes he doesn't follow the hierarchy that has been in place. Sometimes he doesn't buy into previous power structures. Does that necessarily mean that he needs to lose his job? Because whatever you say about Tom Sermani, undefeated in 2013, there are reasons to look at his resume and go, this doesn't make any damn sense. In the aftermath of a win, okay, yeah, maybe they didn't take their chances. They win 2-0. News release comes out on a Sunday night. It's amazing. And I guess one of my immediate questions upon seeing the news, and we'll see who steps up as a replacement for the U.S. women. Because again, 14 months ahead of a World Cup here. And the release was so short, to the point, late Sunday night stuff. U.S. Soccer has announced that Tom Sermani has been relieved of his duties. U.S. Soccer Director of Development Jill Ellis will serve as interim head coach, starting with their next match against China on April 10th. We want to thank Tom, blah, 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 says Suino Galati. We'll begin looking for a new coach immediately to guide our women's national team toward qualifying for the 2015 World Cup. Quick quote from Tom Sermani about being disappointed. Apparently he was blindsided. Two separate stories this morning. Grant Wall, the two I saw, Grant Wall and Leander Shalakins, both with quotes from Sermani saying he had no idea it was coming. I feel for Sermani. I want this team to be successful, but I feel for the guy because I don't know what kind of politics behind the scenes. And this seems like a political move. Seems like player politics has resulted in that man losing his job. And maybe it's a sliding scale. Maybe because the U.S. women are supposed to be dominant, you have to live up to an incredibly high standard. And if you're not meeting it in every sense of the word, if you're not making people happy, then you lose your job. But I can't imagine this would ever happen on the men's side. I can't imagine it would ever happen on the men's side. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just saying we had that story from Brian Strauss. We know that things weren't all great behind the scenes, the U.S. men's national team. But was there any sense at any point that the federation was going to make a change and fire Jurgen Klinsmann? No, of course not. In fact, the track record of U.S. soccer when it comes to the men is those guys get a full cycle and more most of the time. Nathan on Twitter, a situation like this, while sad, is good practice for U.S. soccer handling players as the U.S. men's national team grows in stature. It's good practice to listen to the players. So if the stars of the men's national team, and let's put Clint Dempsey on that list and put Tim Howard on that list, and let's put Michael Bradley on that list, maybe Josie Altidore, maybe Landon Donovan. Those guys went to the federation and said, we don't like Klinsmann, It's not working. He's not communicating well. What would U.S. Soccer do? I don't think they do a damn thing. I think they'd back their coach. In this particular case, Jurgen Klinsmann, paying him $2.5 million, changed the culture. He of the resume and the European titles, the World Cups, and everything else. Bayern Munich. They back him without a doubt. Without a doubt. I don't even think I don't think there's any question at all. It clearly shows you, and again, this is about the U.S. women being one of the best teams in the world, if not the best team in the world right now. And supposed to be. They have reached that status. They have earned that status. And now if they are not living up to that status, there will be a change. Meanwhile, the men are aspiring to world prominence. They're still trying. They're still climbing that ladder, rung by rung. So they need a coach who has the mandate to lead them in that direction, I guess. Apparently, Sermani didn't have the mandate. Nathan says he means good practice in dealing with players trying to force the change, handling the situation professionally. So I guess the question is, did U.S. Soccer handle this situation professionally? Sermani's going to talk. He's going to talk more. I don't know if he's going to throw anybody under the bus necessarily. Here's his quote to Leander Schlackens. I was surprised. I didn't see it coming, to be honest. Generally, you always have an intuitive feel about these kind of scenarios, and I didn't. Perhaps I should have, but I didn't. I didn't sense what obviously the Federation sensed, and I've got to take some blame for that because it's my job to have a sense around the team. If the team didn't believe in what we're doing, I should be able to have a sense of that and then be able to either continue to sell the idea of what we're trying to do or change tack and go in a different direction. But I didn't sense that the players hadn't bought into what we're trying to do. Now, is that on Sermani for not getting his message across effectively? Or is that on the players who maybe didn't come to Sermani when they were concerned? If you let the players have the ear of the people who make the hiring and firing decisions, you're always going to have a dysfunctional situation. Is the U.S. women's national team dysfunctional? I don't know. Like, I'm not casting that out there. But just to take this to a different place, look at any professional sports team where one or two or three players have the ear of the person who is responsible for hiring and firing the head coach. Is that team successful? Most of the time, they're not. I can't think of one. I can't think of one team where the players have the power to force a coach to change, where that team is successful. So again, the issue isn't necessarily whether Tom Sermani was the right guy for the job or whether he could lead them to World Cup glory next year. The question is whether or not the dynamics, the politics, the power structure of the U.S. women's national team is going to give them the ability to be as successful as they want to be. Maybe it's just a natural function of the star power of those players. And we don't even know who they are. I don't know what players were upset. I don't know what players went to the Federation and said this isn't working. Here's Nathan summing it up. In regards to the women's national team, they are the power in women's soccer. Changes like this happen with big men's soccer in soccer nations. Again, I think this happens, especially if results don't measure up to standards. But do they happen in this manner? Because again, the story out there, people I trust who know sources in the women's soccer world will tell you that this is because behind the scenes, the players weren't happy and they forced him out. There you go. All right. It's going to do it for Soccer Morning on a Monday. It's been a great show. Lots of Atlanta talk. You're probably going to get your fill of Atlanta talk on this show for a while. Please go to iTunes. Ratings and reviews help us out a lot. And after you're done doing that, check out soccermorning.com where you can help support the show. Soccer Morning, a listener-supported enterprise. We are doing this because you guys like it, and we need you to help us out by going to soccermorning.com and supporting the show. Thank you very much to Jonathan Tannenwald, to everybody that called in, all of our people down in the ATL. Best of luck with your soccer team. Best of luck with MLS in Atlanta. We'll see what happens. Looking forward to April 16th. Thanks to producer Trevor. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.